This is Bam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Pepper Cat, and we're going to talk about unmasking vulnerability. I'll put it up here. Unmasking vulnerability: how the adult industry reveals the truth about us all, and tell your story in between all that. But I want to welcome you to the Bam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We've been podcasting since 2016. We're on episode 1,222 with this one.
Wow.
But we always like to talk to people about their story. But before we do that, we ask a couple of questions of any guest that comes on the show. What motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Pepper Cat, and I am in the adult industry. I mainly focus on online content, and what motivates me and what I do as an adult content creator, I think it's what's beyond what people see. The
Hmm.
adult industry goes deeper than what people think it is. And I believe that me being in this industry has allowed me to see vulnerabilities of men that's not always accepted or shown. And that's what keeps me in this industry, is really being or having empathy
Hmm.
for my customers that we don't always see publicly, especially from women too.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Well,
Yeah.
being a creative, I'm always interested in all creatives, and you have a podcast, so you're a podcaster as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
And so I just like to talk to all sides because being a creative, there's like all different sides of creativity.
Mhm.
And what
Yeah.
you're doing is like, theater and acting, and then it's also adult entertainment, but it's all kind of intertwined with creative drive and
Mhm.
entrepreneurship and things like that. So, people might not look at it that way, but I look at it from like,
Mhm.
all sides. Like all artists have sides to themselves, and sometimes we go into deep, you know, sensuality. Guys like Prince,
Right.
Dirty Mind. People would say, well, they got to ban that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
people just can't handle like sexuality. So when people do at certain
Mhm.
levels, they can, maybe Marvin Gaye, or when
Yeah.
Prince Dirty Mind, or
Yeah.
like, Darling Nikki, then they're like, oh, well, you gone too far. But
Right.
yeah, it's just like to get into it in terms of how did you go from being a news producer to moving into this area?
Yeah, so I was a news producer for almost 3 years at local stations, and I did mostly nighttime news, morning side, and then I did a talk show, a local talk show, and I enjoyed it. It just didn't pay well. A lot
Mhm.
of people think that news producers get a lot of money, and that's nothing far from the truth, especially at certain markets. And I felt like I was doing more than what I was paid for. And
Mhm.
I had a lot of creativity, and I needed something where I could also show my passion but get paid for it too. And
Yeah, it's
so,
kind of like that
yeah.
artist, why artists, end up leaving like the constraints of a label or the
Hmm.
constraints of being within a, typical entertainment organizations, because then they get pigeonholed
Right.
or they get put into situations where they're
Hmm.
not able to do what they want. And then people today, you want to own your vision.
Right.
And if you have a vision, it's like, why am
Hmm.
I going to work for hire and give my vision to somebody else, like some guy working at Marvel Comics or something? It's
Exactly.
like I gave up Spider-Man, now I don't get any money. Marvel gets the money.
Exactly. And I felt like I had the vision for them, and they were making profit. And I mean, when I was there, they were doing well and it was great, but I just wasn't getting paid. I
Yeah.
wasn't getting paid for my worth. And I had
Yes.
a master's, I had my bachelor's, and there were colleagues who were getting paid more than I was, and they had less experience. And
Why
so
do
I
you think
just
that
felt
was?
like,
Why do you think that was? Was it
um,
because of who they knew? Was it because
mhm.
they were men? Was it what was the deal?
More so, they were on air talent, and most of the time, on air talent get paid more. At least where I was,
Mhm.
and although I was the behind the scenes, writing the scripts,
Mhm.
producing, talking to guests. They still got paid more. It could have been to like a prestige in terms of them being well known, which is great, but I just felt like I was not getting paid for my worth. And it could have been too with me being a woman at my last station. I'm not sure, but I do know for sure that it did have a lot to do with them being on air talent.
Yeah, because
Hmm.
there's different tiers of people feel like there's certain tiers, everything. In
Hmm.
my day job, I'm a software engineer, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
there's a Silicon Valley thing where like if you look
Hmm.
like Bill Gates, like you look like an Elon Musk, like you automatically are considered to get the higher level. You look like me, they
Yeah.
might not think they should get paid. And it's been like that for forever. It's like they don't want to pay people certain types of people. And then you
Right.
you end up going independent or you end up working with a smaller company to get more opportunity because like you go with a smaller business or an entrepreneur or a startup where you had your own idea and you actually start it, then
Hmm.
you own it. I mean, there's
Right.
something about owning it. So like you created your podcast, like that's your idea, right? The spicy spectrum, that's your
Hmm.
idea, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'm glad that I walked away. I made probably like triple as much as I made at my old station. And I'm able to run my podcast as well as contribute my creative vision and adult entertainment. And it's not the usual adult entertainment. I have a background in film, so I incorporate music and different shots and a storyline, which I believe is what's missing from the adult industry is the art.
Or I mean, kind of like the 70s and the
Mhm.
60s, they
Yeah.
actually did film. They
Right,
actually
right.
had film producers, and they would,
Mhm,
they didn't have super big budgets, but they did, storyboard
mhm.
writers, makeup,
Right,
like production. So
exactly.
I kind of get what you're saying. It's kind of like in today's world, in the music industry, everybody's just
Mhm,
in a DAW, which everybody knows. They're just on their computer. Like I still play my
mhm.
Moogs and my Rolands and my keyboards by hand. I'm like, that's an old art. Like you actually play it till you get it right.
Right, right,
You know,
and I
it's
mhm,
a creative, like an artist. If you're an artist and you got a vision,
mhm,
you got like you want to like your music is central. You have certain camera shots or angles or
exactly.
scenes you want to write out. That's the birth of film is like Citizen Kane. Orson
Mhm.
Welles had all these ideas that were not conventional, and
Yeah.
and he got them out there. And he said, well, "I didn't know you couldn't do that, so I did it."
Yeah, and yeah, no, I agree, and I feel like it's easy for people to upload something, which I'm not knocking other creators, but I do feel like there's a loss of actually putting in like work in terms of being creative and what you put out there. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's what's missing. And so that's what I do with my work online too.
But the
Yeah.
hours, it's like they say, it takes 10,000 hours to get to be a really good at anything,
Mhm.
like from a gymnast
Yeah.
to a bass player to an athlete trying to get that 3-point shot or, get
Mhm.
a hole in one, whatever. It's like you got to put the work in. Everybody today wants to
Exactly.
use like cheats. They want to
Mhm.
cheat their way into it. It's like, well, I don't know how to play a bass. I'll just put it into the DAW and
Yeah.
write it. But like writing it versus like Bootsy Collins playing it,
Mhm.
couple different things. There's a lot of difference between that. There's something
Yeah.
about actually really doing it. And so in terms of like your unique vision, how did you start to formulate that, when you got into this kind of moving from being a producer, news producer to like, well, I've got these ideas in the adult
Yeah.
space. Did somebody help you get into the space or you found your way into it?
I came in contact. So I actually started as a phone sex operator, and I found someone who helped me and showed me the ropes. And I was audio first, and I would do role plays over the phone. And what
Mhm.
people don't understand is that it actually takes more effort to do phone work than it is to be on cam sometimes because you have to be more creative because they can't see you. So you have to use your voice and you have to use storytelling and set up the scene. And so when I did that, I transformed that into the videos that I made to basically bring my phone calls to life.
Okay.
And I just took notes on what my customers enjoyed, what they liked, and then I put it into a video. And then I started a series, and I have my adult series that people love to tune in every week. But so I started as a phone sex operator, and I was able to get traction and talk to different types of men and do different
Mhm.
types of fantasies that they enjoy, which I still do too as well.
So when you're in that space as your job, in terms of like, doing erotic or adult entertainment,
Hmm.
does it actually interfere with like your private life? Because you're in that space all the time.
Hmm.
Are you able to separate it, or is it like it's a job or it's an art to you, so it doesn't cross over? Maybe it's like because sometimes people like you're so into something
Yeah.
like Prince. He was he's singing about sex all the time, and he's kind of everybody
Hmm.
thought he was into it, and sometimes they
Right.
found out he was kind of a wallflower, he was very shy, and was just writing music most of the time.
Hmm.
He wasn't actually doing everything he wrote, so the fantasy was kind of separate from the person, or is
Hmm.
it part of you?
Yeah, well, well, in my personal life, in terms of my relationships, I've always been open, sexually open. But I do, when I'm not doing this, I always try to have an activity. I go to museums, I travel, I have my weekly activities where I try to separate the two just so that I can get my mind off of it, because it
Yeah,
is a lot.
yes. Yeah,
It's a lot. Like, you hear a lot of crazy, not crazy, outrageous fantasies and stories that you do need to take a break, because if you consume yourself with it all day, it can make you go a little
because I was wondering, like, how
crazy.
method actors, like, kinda get lost, they talk
Hmm.
about, like, famous method actors like Pacino and, even The Dark Knight, it's like they sometimes they have a hard time getting out of character,
Right.
and if so even musicians, like, you're on stage for 2 hours in front of a big crowd, you have to come down from that, and
Hmm.
if you stay in that, it can be you need to kinda give yourself a space from it, so you go off and, go hike in the woods, you go off in a boat, do something else. You go do yoga
Yeah.
and you get out of it.
Hmm.
You don't just stay, because David Bowie kind of talked about how like sometimes he stayed inside of the idea of Ziggy Stardust, and he didn't.
Hmm.
When he was off stage, he was still Ziggy for weeks in between shows. He
Hmm.
didn't know how
Yeah.
to come down from it. Later, he learned how to get out of that, but it was something that is, you can get trapped in.
Right. Yeah. And I like, even with us, speaking now, I don't act like this on camera. Like, it's a totally different persona that I put on. Like, this
Mm,
is how I naturally act when I'm
mhm.
off camera. I do amp it up a little on phone calls and like
Yeah, it's like
content that I
the
make. But
stage self.
yeah.
Your stage
Yeah.
self, like, every musician has a stage self.
Right.
You think about Mick Jagger kind of prancing around. Then when you actually talk to me, it sounds like an English businessman. He's not the
Mhm.
wild man that he is on stage, right? That a lot of
Right.
times that there's that difference. See Freddie Mercury, film of him being so like really like the ultimate front man, but then you talk to me, he's like
Mhm.
this British gentleman, just
Right.
yeah. So you can
Mhm.
separate because you have a stage self, like
Exactly.
there's other self, like the other you.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I started my podcast, Spicy Spectrum, is because I wanted my fans to see a different part of me. Yeah, I still kind of, get a little sensual on there, but I do show more of an intellectual side of myself
You
when I'm
talk
on
about it.
there.
Yeah, you talk
Yeah.
from a different perspective. You're not in the fantasy when you're in that
Right.
mode. You're kinda
Right.
more like bridging between like,
Mhm.
this is the real world, this is the fantasy world, and this is how we can talk about it from like
Exactly.
an adult perspective, but like not just an adult, but like a holistic perspective. Because a lot of people
Right.
wanna put things
Mhm.
into boxes and put them into
Yeah.
lanes. There's a
Mhm.
lot to me is like, things kinda get interwoven
Mhm.
and people have a lot of gates where they have a lot of lanes and they wanna in
Mhm.
fantasy, it ends up being a lot about how you break through those gates. As a musician, we try to break through. and get people to imagine things,
Mhm.
or to feel things like an audio screenplay in your mind when we write the song. We
Mhm.
want that to evoke something that you or can be familiar with, or you're like a sound painting, that
Right.
idea. So when you're in a fantasy world of a fantasy writer or a fantasy actor, or where you're coming from an eroticism, you want to be able to kind of paint that vision of the world building you built, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, and I agree. And I think too, like I think what people don't understand too is that a lot of times when people come to us, they want the fantasy, but they also, like you said, like they want the more authentic side too, because it makes you appear more human too. And
Mhm.
so they don't just want the fantasy, they want the
They
person
want the vulnerability
behind
too.
that. Right.
Yeah, because the whole thing about being authentic, because
Mhm.
everybody says to me, "Oh, I could," they're always telling us like, "Oh, AI can take over everything." So
And it
you
can.
really, I don't know what your opinion was like. Oh, people just want to build AI,
Hmm.
dream dates, right, and just have the computer generate it. What's your opinion like? Because I think a lot of actors and creative people are kind of going against like their unions, say, well, like we
Hmm.
can't just take AI and replace me as a performer or an actor or an artist, because it's
Yeah.
something I bring to the table that
Hmm.
the AI, no matter what that machine learning library has, it can't be human. Maybe you can kind of feign being human, but I don't think it can
Hmm.
actually do it.
Right. Yeah. So I view AI as something, at least in my industry, as something that can be a tool to help, but it can never replace. Like you can use AI to schedule your posts, on
Yeah.
social media to promote,
Yeah,
but
or your podcast. You use it for
right.
SEO, you use it for scheduling, you use it for
Right. But
all
you
those
can
parts.
never place the human. People come to us for the human connection. And that's part of the reason why during the pandemic, you saw a consumption increase in adult entertainment when people were experiencing not having that human connection. And so people come to us to have a human connection that you can never find with AI. There have been times when guys have talked to me about me being replaced, but they're talking to me on a phone text line, still paying me. So it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, you're talking about it, but you still need my
yeah,
reaction, and you still need my energy that you
yeah.
can't get from AI. I mean, AI can only do so many things, and it can't get raunchy like us
No, that's
either.
so it can just it basically just takes what was done before, but it's
Hmm.
really bad about the now, right?
Right.
And it's like a musician, like you think about like a jazz fusion musician. If you think of like a Miles Davis or Herbie Hancock,
Hmm.
they get on stage, somebody hits a note that's not expected, and they can actually groove to it and then evolve the song. So there's
Right.
no bad note, there's only an opportunity. In that
Hmm.
same frame is like when you're in that flow state in the moment, that's where human beings shine, because the machine can kind of maybe take a bunch of options it has, but it has limited sets of options where it can go. It may have
Right.
100 case statements, but a
Mhm,
human being can have like a millions of different things, and it's really based on what you feel at that moment.
mhm.
And you could like what you said yesterday is not what you say today, is not what you say tomorrow, based on what the input
Right,
is today. And that's what the machine can't figure out. It's trying to do that, but it doesn't have a personality. It can feign
right.
personality, but it's kind of fake. And you can tell.
Exactly.
Not authentic.
Mhm. Yeah, and like, also AI, is actually a fetish. So there are men who do like AI, but that's a category in
So
itself,
yeah.
which people don't understand is that AI is a fetish in the adult industry, and there's always been AI chat boxes on adult sites, and
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are AI dolls, and if we were to be replaced, it would have happened already.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they just after a while, it just doesn't do it, to
Right.
me. I think it's kinda like why people, with the online when stars couldn't, like all musicians, everybody went online. Adult
Mhm.
stars went online, musicians went online, actors went online. Everybody started doing podcasts or online forums or whatever,
Mhm.
interactive conversations, whether they were audio or video or whatever, or being able to create original content and then putting it out and
Mhm.
owning it.
Yeah.
And then people started to say, hey, you know what? I can actually do that. And the fact that it wasn't like film level quality, it may depend on your equipment, right? But it looked like it felt real because it's not like overproduced. It didn't feel like an infomercial where somebody was
Mhm.
phoning it in. Because if like, there's something about when something's real that
Mhm.
is appealing to people, and the vulnerability of it. The fact that like, oh, you could make a mistake, or you're gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not just like perfect lines. Like in music today, we have a problem where people like expect this computer-driven music that's so perfect it doesn't skip a beat.
Right.
Tones are it's just overly perfect. It's too pristine. I think that's why people like punk rock. Like when the
Right.
Clash and all these punk rock, and the Ramones and all these bands showed up, because they had all these great singers that were 5 octave singers, like Marvin Gaye's to like Michael Jackson's. But then they could get a guy, like Joe Strummer is like there's something honest about the fact that he isn't like 5 octave voice. He's just saying what he wants to say, and people are
Mhm.
like that. And so when people see that, oh, that is like somebody I could actually talk to
Right.
versus somebody like you'd never get to talk to.
Yeah, yeah. People are craving authentic connections right now. Even though there's technology, people want that. Like even me, like I don't even listen to mainstream music. It's just like I want the real
you know, underground or new,
instruments.
yeah, or even
Yeah, I
older.
want the real
People go back.
tone.
People go back to the
Yeah.
60s and 70s. I've read, being a musician, people are going back, and the numbers are people are streaming stuff from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s
Mhm.
more than stuff
Yeah.
from like now
Yeah.
because they're looking for the fact is back in the day, things were like second, third take, and it was
Mhm.
live in the studio, and they
Right.
actually had happy accidents. They kept mistakes or not,
Exactly.
or just do it like that. Why not? It's people today are trying to be too perfect. It's like on the
Mhm.
net, everybody's trying to fit the algorithm instead of
Right.
having like just because you get a million views doesn't mean you're actually successful. You could have like 100 views, but then a Grammy award winning producer sees your thing and you get a chance to deal with them. Like it depends on who you
Yeah.
impact. That's
Right.
volume is the quality of the impact.
Exactly.
Depends on what game you're in. If you're a volume person, I guess that's your game. But if you're into having opportunities, then all those views sometimes aren't the opportunity. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's like reaching a certain type of person might be the opportunity.
Right. I agree. Yeah. And like I'm not the most like famous adult content creator, but I have a solid group of fans who appreciate my talent and what I bring to the adult industry. And I have listeners for my podcast because I don't want to just focus on like the big numbers. I actually want to bring quality content that people can appreciate that you can't find
Well, you
anywhere
you
else.
create your own it's like the law of attraction. You put
Mhm.
something out there, then you find your fan base.
Right.
Like if you never put
Mhm.
it out, you won't know. Like I could put out a song and suddenly there are people in New Zealand that like it. Well, I didn't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm in New Hampshire. Nobody in New Hampshire is listening, but all these people in New Zealand or, you know, South Africa or, Hong
Mhm.
Kong. You never know where something's going to kick off unless you put it out there. And then these tribe
Exactly.
kind of comes to you because they feel your vibe,
Mhm.
right? And then you're like, wow, like, well, I could actually go tour New Zealand because I got people like that, that want to go.
Right.
They listen to. So you just put it, you don't know until you put it out there, and so you don't have to be constrained by your physical location or or who you think will like it, right?
Exactly.
You just put it out there and see who likes it.
Right. And I think that's what's so special about online adult content, which I think people misunderstand is that we speak to people from all over the world. Like I've spoken to people in India and Egypt, all over and we have customers from all over the world who find us and you have a chance to get to know people from different cultures
Mhm.
and just have access to different people that you wouldn't have even had access to. A lot of us like meet famous people who like want to, have a private
Yeah,
space. And
yeah.
I think that's really cool about online is that you can have access to
For the
literally
intimacy of
anyone.
yeah, that you even though it's online, you can still have, like, an intimate kind of one-on-one discussion with a private
Right.
with somebody you can get connected to people you never would have thought that you would be able
Mhm.
to reach.
Right.
And this idea that you have this design your dream girl concept,
Mhm.
where you can talk about that because it seems like customization is really big. Like, in a world where we have all this automation and
Mhm.
sameness, what we're finding in multiple industries is people want customized experiences. They want customized
Exactly.
products. So if you're able to customize something, then that's your secret sauce. That's your advantage, right?
Yeah. So I created Design Your Dream Girl, which got trademarked today, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah. But I created it so that I can have an customized experience for those who may not feel comfortable talking about their desires or what they're into, or if they just want to find someone where they can truly be themselves and have a customized experience with video chatting, sexing, or sorry, texting, or
Yeah.
different type of digital experiences. And I'm all about customizing and molding it into what they want. I basically provide a service where if they want a fantasy, they can have it fulfilled in a safe place where they can be themselves and not feel shame for what they're doing, or they can fully express themselves sexually or just have an authentic connection. And I know they're creating these AI bots, but I want the human
Human
connection in
connection.
this industry, and that's why I created it.
So you're
Mhm.
doing like video and audio, or is there
Mhm.
both, or one or the other, or either one?
It's video, audio, pictures, chatting. It's more access to a desired experience at your
Mhm.
fingertips. That's what it is.
But
Yeah.
I think that's where people, until we have holograms,
Mhm.
right? It's even more like that's like the next phase. Everybody's been like, "Oh, that's gonna be here." Like 10 years ago, they said it was gonna be here. It's still not fully here.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, I mean, that's the idea. Like, yeah, you get, the virtual, you know, and I wonder how have you gotten into the VR? Or you're looking at VR, or you're not looking at that?
I am looking to get into VR. I know certain adult sites actually have VR options, and so I am just to play around with it and to
Yeah.
see
It's not fully
how it's
like where I
received.
would like it's not like the holodeck on Star Trek, it's not
Mhm.
that's when when it gets to be something like on Next Generation,
Mhm.
and it's like then it's there. To me, it's like, well, I don't see when's that happening. I don't see that happening yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of like the sci-fi in me. But yeah, the idea that fantasies are I'm a big sci-fi head, comic book
Mhm.
head, music itself. A lot of Phantom Electric Ghost music goes into erotica. We've got albums that are kind of like get censored and we go
Oh,
into it.
really?
Yeah, but it's like, can we? Part of my character was I created a female version of myself called Josephine Electric.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and she's a member of the band. Phantom Electric Ghost is this idea of
Mhm.
ghost. They created a band, and
Yeah.
Josephine is the lead singer of the band.
Oh,
And,
that is so cool.
and so,
I love
lately
that.
I've been doing like the male Phantom character. He has songs too. And
Mhm.
when I first started the band in 2016, like Josephine sang the majority of the songs. And I'm actually
Really?
working on a Josephine Electric Ghost album that's all her again.
Mhm.
She's kind of took a sabbatical for the
Yeah.
last couple of years, but back. But a lot of her stuff is like overtly sexual and goes into
Mhm.
kind of ideas of like the female within I think all people have a female and male kind of you
Mhm.
know yin and yang.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as a writer, I said, well, if I actually could use this technology where I can in real time do a female voice,
Yeah.
I can kind of bring her to life with all
Right.
these
Yeah.
ideas. And I actually had written a story. It actually came from a science fiction character I wrote as a writer. And I said,
Mhm.
could I actually turn her into a character in a band? And then I did. And
Yeah.
so it's like, so the idea of fantasy is like intertwined in like, I think all kind of, creativity, but I
Oh,
think what
yeah.
you're doing is like really cool. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
my Josephine character would be
Mhm.
into it.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's pretty cool, and I think we need more creativity like that, to be honest. But yeah, I think there's a difference between fantasy and your real life, and it's totally okay. At least for me, it's okay to indulge in a fantasy and keep that there and live your life too and have that balance because life is so stressful. It's
Yeah.
okay to
It's good to have
unwind
it
and
would be
just
expansive.
Mhm.
The idea
Yeah.
is like we get so loaded down with all these mores, with all these
Mhm.
rules, and there are rules for a reason.
Rules. Right,
But but
right.
but but, but yeah, like, even in the music, there's a canon, in literature,
Mhm.
there's a canon. There's a you're supposed to do this. And then when
Right.
you do something outside of it, like you get at Jimi Hendrix, like feedback wasn't supposed to be done.
Mhm.
The recording engineers tried to edit it out when Hendrix tried it. And he said, no, it's staying in. And so
Mhm.
when you get a creator that suddenly says, like, no, I'm going to break the canon, right? I'm going to do something different.
Right.
Like a Bob Dylan, like his voice was not the typical voice, but he was a really
Mhm.
good writer. So then, Columbia gave him a chance. And then opened up a whole generation of songwriters and singer-songwriters that didn't have perfect pitch.
Mhm.
So you could get out there. So the idea that you got to be in the norm is kind of antithetical to creativity to me. It's like
Exactly.
you have to kind of open it up, and then people are so kind of tied down that they need outlets like
Mhm.
yourself. You need to be able to get to someplace, whether you're talking to a therapist about
Yeah.
your inner child or you're working out your sexual hangups because you need
Mhm.
to be able to not bottle them up, because
Right.
then things go bad if you bottle things up, in my opinion. But
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's what people don't understand, and people come to us to show especially men, where they have to carry the weight of having a mask on and being told what to do and, don't do that and don't do that, but and our space, you can be yourself, you can let go and not feel shameful for something that's natural, and it's okay to indulge in that and be able to have a space to truly be yourself and not feel like what you're doing is wrong. And
yeah,
so
there's a
that
lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
fear and shame and
Mhm.
safety, they're all kind of wrapped up. Like
Right.
we get told, to fear things, and we get told
Yeah.
like things that are the truth, but they're not really the truth. It is like somebody's belief.
Right.
So somebody might tell you that's wrong.
Mhm.
Well, it was wrong for them because the grandpa told them, and the great grandpa told them, and the whole community told them it was wrong.
Exactly.
But they actually keep on hitting the wall because they feel it, right?
Right.
And then you get to a critical mass, and you have this kind of crucible moment, and you're like, you know what? Whatever they were saying, it does not for me anymore. But it's like,
Yeah.
that when you kind of break on, like Jim Morrison talking about break on through the other side. That was like a famous like
Mhm.
literary concept that he pulled out of the literary world, poet world, great literature. This idea that
Mhm.
you got to break through these walls,
Right.
and you have to express yourself. And then you have so many people today are so tied down to like
Mhm.
got to be this way.
Right.
It's like really. And then some
Yeah.
of those people are so tied down. It's like you go look in the dark end of the street, and they're like, "You're not so tied down."
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny that you say that. We get a lot of like like Christian men too, because it's like we get men who are like pastors and priests because
Yeah,
they live lives of being this perfect person and and being in church and they can't really let loose. And we get a lot of
yeah, I
men
would expect
who
that
can't do
because like
that.
it's like if you're trying to live up to something that you're trying to be not human.
Right.
There's
That's
a
a good way
lot
to
of
put
things where
it.
it's one thing being spiritual and you have aspirations to be enlightened or be connected or be what you think is a good person. But there's things,
Mhm.
we're human beings, we're animals. We're
Right.
human beings. We have feel. If you deny the fact that you're a human animal. You deny, like, there's all kinds of aspects of yourself, not just one thing. People wear a hat, they're a preacher, they're a businessman,
Right.
but they're also a man, right? They also could be, you know, an artist, but they hide it because they
Hmm.
think, well, that's foo-foo. You shouldn't do that. Well, that's wrong. You shouldn't do this.
Right.
And so then they get all hung up and in the contradictions when if you are more like true to your heart and your spirit and your soul, you
Hmm.
embrace like, the universe. Which is like, oh, that sounds crazy. It's like, well, well, I think you feel a lot better when you do.
No, yeah, I agree. Like you said, you need the balance. You can't just,
Extremes always
have
cause
one
trouble.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can kind of live life, not that you got to be perfect balance, like it's like a storm. That
Hmm.
you don't want a captain of a ship that's never gone through a storm
Right.
because they don't know how to write it out. With
Exactly.
life, like an artist, you can't have a perfect day because melancholy is the core of a lot of songs. Some of the best songs come from bad experiences. So if you
Right.
only have good experiences, nobody's probably want to listen to what you wrote.
Hmm. Yeah,
You
I
have to learn
agree.
how to process the things that happen in life and figure out how to have a cathartic experience by processing things that happen to you and figure
Right.
out like how to do that. The
Right.
multiple legs of the human soul.
Hmm.
There's like all different aspects, but it's not just one thing. But everybody always wants to just do that one thing, but it
Hmm.
never really works that way.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So your podcast, how long have you been doing your podcast?
Since 2023. So
Well,
about
that's
two
cool.
years now. 54. Yeah.
Do you find that the podcast space is can handle your content? Do you get like regulated or people interfere with like the because sometimes I find sometimes things get dinged or you're not able to get it on certain networks if you say
Right.
certain things.
Yeah, I label it as adult content, so I think I'm safe. Hopefully, knock on wood. But for the most part, I don't get flagged or anything like
Oh,
that.
that's good.
Yeah, because it does get a little raunchy, but it's also educational too. So I think that's
Mhm.
what's kind of saving me from getting in trouble.
That's good. Yeah, it is. I hate it when people are just too restrictive of
I
content,
know.
because you
Yeah.
want to be able to honestly say things, and have people on to
Mhm.
say things, and then some algorithms are like you start talking about a certain thing, and then suddenly your numbers drop.
Right.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
it's like really, they like you guys are gonna suppress that,
Right.
but
Yeah.
like what's like some lessons learned like when you first got into the industry, like just making your way to where you are now, like what are things that you would kind of tell the audience about that you maybe didn't expect would happen?
Yeah. I think one of the main lessons, which I mentioned it briefly, but I'll expand, is the vulnerability I see in this line of work. I know that it's been a big topic of discussion when it comes to the male loneliness epidemic, and I've seen it firsthand
Hmm.
during this line of work, especially a lot of young men who tell me how frustrating it is with dating. There's a lot of men who tell me just, their experiences with feeling lonely and misunderstood and judged. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons is having empathy for that. I know there's a lot of discussions online about it and people have their different views, but I did um, gain a greater appreciation for men and their sexuality and just getting a deeper understanding of what male loneliness looks like. It's not all of my customers, but I
Yeah.
do see it from my perspective from a subset of men that I feel like it's not discussed as much. And that's my viewpoint of just seeing it play out from an adult entertainer's point of view. And, just having a greater appreciation for people's men's experiences. centered around that.
That's interesting because
Yeah.
because I think a lot of times, like, I'm a child of the '70s, and
Mhm.
how people used to interact in the '70s and the '80s. Now in this world, like
Mhm.
everything's like online dating.
Right.
Where in the old world is like you actually physically would go places and
Mhm.
meet people and do things, and you found ways to connect, and it wasn't always through some kind of dating thing, right? You just found ways to socially connect, and
Right.
it seems like either those things are dried up, or people have lost social skills or etiquette,
Mhm.
or they just don't know how to communicate.
Yeah, I think the pandemic, like, it was already like that with social media, like you said. I also think the pandemic too, with people not interacting and them not being used to going out and saying hi to a person in public and having small talk, I feel like that's lost. Even with me, like when I'm in public and I say hi to someone, they look at me like I'm crazy, and I just want to
Yeah, like
have
yeah,
small
being
talk
able
with
to
people.
just being able to say hi to your like in your neighborhood, like
Right.
I'm in the Northeast, it's like say hi to the neighbors. You
Uh-huh.
walk in and people, have a conversation. You go out into the store, you say hi, you talk small talk,
Mhm.
just and then people sometimes he's like, well, what's this guy up to?
Right.
There's always like everybody's got like there's like this guy's got nefarious intent, right?
Right.
So people don't want to communicate because like things have been kind of hyper sensitive to like, oh, there's a serial killer, that oh, this person is a
Mhm.
weird or a freak. There's all this thing. Everybody thinks the worst
Right.
about people like in the '70s, everybody's kind of, maybe it's a hippie vibe. Everybody was like, they're going out to these concerts, they're going to these communes, they're doing all these things. The Peace Corps is like the idea of community
Mhm.
versus individual. So
Right.
growing up, as a kid in the '70s, and my brother was 7 years older, and he was like in that kind of hippie stuff, you know,
Right.
and he had hippie friends around, and these big get-togethers with lots of people, and there's like people just would spontaneously just get into things, and whether or not it wasn't always a party, but it was just communication, and you're
Mhm.
like, wow, does that only happen when you go to a concert? Do
Right.
you in other places?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a lost art, communication and people speaking to one another.
And what do you think? Like the podcasting has kind of opened up. I found it like, during the pandemic. I did this before the pandemic. We've been
Mhm.
on the air since 2016. But
Wow.
the idea was, during the pandemic, we got the exponential increase in people, getting involved in the show, and the
Mhm.
number of guests, went from 4 a month to like 20, 25 a month.
Wow.
But the idea of being able to talk to people around the world with this tech
Mhm.
and do it in a long form. Because some people was telling me, "Oh, do a 15-minute podcast, do shorter form." And I kind of was a big pusher of like do it long form, so you really, you warm up in 15 minutes. You're just warming up. Like if
Right.
you do it for like 45 minutes an hour, you actually can really get into a good conversation with a person and get their perspective,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I agree. I think long form content is a lost art too, especially with TikTok and the short clips. Even me, like I like to watch long hour videos and watch long form content, especially with podcasts because, like you said, you only get into a little bit of it, like the first 15 minutes. But if you really sit down and listen and turn off your phone and not be
Distracted.
distracted, you can learn, a thing
Yeah.
or two from people.
But it's like a master class. The way I look at it, every time you talk to somebody, you're getting a master class in humanity. Every
Right.
time, like if you read a
Mhm.
new like client or somebody's like taking part in into what you do, like every person's like a new found, you know, resource
Mhm.
for your soul, right? Like every time you
Right.
meet another person, you get a different aspect of humanity.
Exactly.
And if you're a writer, that's what we live on. Writers observe. Like we write, we look at human being. Everything happens around us, other human beings, and we pick up things, and we learn how to
Mhm.
use that in our songs and our writing, and whether you're a songwriter, screenwriter, and script writer, you know, fantasy writer. Like you pick up things
Mhm.
around you, and you learn how to actually build it into something, Right.
Right. And I think going back to what I learned the humanity of men doing this line of work that people don't see. So
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's a
That you
different perspective
yeah.
that I would never
Hmm.
thought. A
Yeah.
lot of times people are so like there's so much of gender kind of um
Yeah.
like, volatility today.
I know it's so
So many
crazy.
people get in the camps and say, well, you're like, and they just get into it's like, well, you know what? We're all there's human beings, right?
Right.
We have all different types of shades to who we are, right?
Right.
And acceptance and empathy is like it's not a bad thing. It's not like that's not woo
Mhm.
woo. Like
Right.
being able to understand another person, is
Mhm.
cool.
It
But people
is.
are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't." It's like I should just be able to judge people.
Right.
like
Right.
like that. Well, where's that going to get you? You're probably
Right.
going to get to be like in your corner,
Hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
like experiencing everything the world has. It's like if you prejudge everybody, then
Hmm.
you kind of get locked into your own thing.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
But you're in a world where people, even if they have a outward image that that's what they do, they come to you and then they let loose.
Yeah. Literally.
So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so so I know what the real deal is. You get the real
Uh-huh.
world. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. But you must get a lot of stories. You get a lot of ideas. Have you ever
Hmm.
thought of like writing a book?
Oh yeah, when I'm an old lady or something, I'll talk about it. I mean, I've met actors and politicians and famous tech guys, but like, yeah, I'll probably write it like in like 40 years or so now.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll
Or
write
you
a
can
book on
always mask
it.
it. People changes. Change the sex, changes or whatever. People
Mhm.
writers do that all the time. I met a
Mhm.
writer that was a psychologist, and they got a lot of content from their patients, but they had to switch everything around so it wasn't
Uh-huh.
recognizable. But it still
Right.
gives you like you get like a big resource, like you got this big like this untapped
Mhm.
well
Right.
of all these stories
Right.
and
Yeah,
all
I
these
have a lot.
characters, and you could write a fiction book with
I
it.
could. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. So
Mhm.
everything you do is like, hey, that's a resource to put in my cap. Like that's
Right.
something I can later, figure out how I could create like a whole
Mhm.
series of like anything. But
Yeah.
it's just really interesting talking to you. I like to talk to people with different perspective, different areas.
Yeah.
And is there anything you think you would want to relate to your audience that we didn't talk about?
No, I think I covered it. I would like to say, adult entertainers. I know there's a lot of controversy around us. It goes deeper than what people think, and we're still human. Our customers are still human, and it's okay to embrace your sexuality, and you shouldn't feel shame about that.
I think that's real
Yeah.
important. Shame. We talk about shame and safety and fear a lot on this show. And
Mhm.
maybe we don't talk enough in this space, but this is a lot of those conversations kind of come out of that. People having problems with their sexuality. People have,
Mhm.
and they kind of get to it, kind of like they've got layers upon layers until they really get to what's the problem.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but that's usually the root cause of everything. Like Freud, you can get into it, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
Most of it,
Yeah.
sociology, psychology, there's always
Mhm.
something rooted and it's a human experience.
It
People are
is.
sexual beings,
We are.
and then they suppress it, and then they wonder why things don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's cool to have people that are more willing to be open about it, willing to give a safe space to explore things. I think that's
Mhm.
cool. And
Yeah.
I want people to check out spicyspectrumpodcast.com. That will be fully clickable. Right
Thank
now
you.
it's not on. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll be on all the other podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And I want to thank you again for being on the podcast. It's really great talking to you, Pepper
Thank
Cat.
you. Thank you. I enjoyed this. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to get to know me, as well as opening up about yourself too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.